Now, Arcadia, the group behind the likes of Miss Selfridge, Topshop and Burton, is facing collapse, putting 13,000 jobs at risk. So what has happened to Sir Philip Green's retail empire? Well, we can take a look at the history of Arcadia, starting in January 1999, when Sir Philip Green took over the retail group Sears, which encompasses brands such as Miss Selfridge, Wallis and Warehouse. Well, a year later, he then acquired British Home Stores for £200 million, saying he could turn the failing business around. Well, by October 2002, Sir Philip had taken over the Arcadia Group for £850 million. He immediately sold the company to his wife, Lady Tina Green. Well, Lady Green received a tax-free £1.2 billion dividend from Arcadia in October 2005. Sir Philip was awarded his knighthood in the 2006 Queen's Birthday Honours List. And then in March 2015, BHS, it made the headlines if you remember, it was sold for £1 to Dominic Chappelle. He's a former bankrupt who was recently jailed for tax evasion. Well, BHS later collapsed a year later, affecting 11,000 jobs across 164 stores. It sparked a big row about Sir Philip's responsibilities to its pensioners. The businessman struck a deal with the pensions watchdogs in February 2017, agreeing to pay more than £360 million to the BHS scheme. Well, 2 years later, the Daily Telegraph published allegations he'd subjected his employees to racial, physical and sexual abuse. Those are claims he strongly denied. And then in May 2019, Arcadia announced it was going to close some stores and cut rent through a company voluntary arrangement. That was to avoid going bust. Well, I'm joined now by the independent retail analyst and chairman of Retail Connections, Chris Field. Afternoon to you, Chris. I mean, when I'm reading out that timeline there, you're reminded of really a litany of problems. It almost sounds like where we are or where we expect to be next week was inevitable. But I suppose it's important to remember that Arcadia was very much the darling of the high street.
That's a long time ago. That's the only problem, unfortunately. And in retail, you've got to keep going. You've got to catch up. You've got to innovate all of the time. And in truth, this is a business that has not really focused on its core strengths or what the hell's happening out in the retail market for a number of years. It's watched competitors like Boohoo and ASOS overtake it. And actually, sad as it is for all the jobs that are going to be lost, I can't really see any way back for it.
Yeah, I mean, the statement from Arcadia talks a lot about COVID and the impact that that has had on the business. But when the fact that the lenders were not prepared to put up 30 million emergency funding for the business underlines the fact that the problems were really quite profound, and lots of accusations in the business press that Sir Philip Green just took his eye off the ball.
He did a long time ago, and I think he handed it over to the wrong kind of person. And actually, there's been no investment in that business for a number of years. And also, if you are investing in retail, are you going to put your money into stores at the moment, particularly into what is essentially a department store type of model, which is probably the worst place to be in retail right now?
Yeah, there's 13,000 people who are going to be watching this very closely. The ripples of a potential failure like this, though, go out far beyond the Arcadia Group, don't they?
They do. It's another casualty in retailing, and I'm afraid there is going to be more to come, because there are retailers who are going to be wishing for a decent Christmas, and whilst there is already quite a boost to the online, that's not going to be much consolation to retailers that are heavily invested in stores and where they're keeping a lot of their stock. So it's pretty bad news all round, whatever tier you might be in.
Regardless, though, it is expected that there will be people circling around the assets, particularly Topshop.
Yes, Topshop, that's a decent brand. Don't forget, they also own some other brands like Cath Kidston, Oasis and Warehouse. And if you think about what, say, someone like Mike Ashley at Fraser's Group has done, he looks at how much stock there is underneath those brands and he jumps on them. And to be honest, that's quite a good strategy, because he's then able to sell them online through his own channels, through marketplaces, through third parties, and make quite a decent profit. But it's not necessarily good for those brands long term. So really, I can't see that Topman or Topshop are brands of any real value once you remove the stores.
Yeah, I suppose the real estate is worth something, isn't it? How do you see Sir Philip Green emerging from this? I mean, he was mired in controversy, wasn't he, because of what happened with BHS. He reluctantly forked out the money to cover the pensions deficit. Does he recover from this?
I don't think so. And I mean, the guy's more or less gone into hiding. As you can see from this footage, he's trying to get away. And I think he's going to generally try and keep out of the way now, because there's very little that he can say to salvage his reputation in retail, which I do think is a shame, because it is worth remembering that this is a man many years ago, to be fair, actually definitely had his finger on the pulse in retail. He bought all of those businesses at a great price, and no one else was prepared to pay that kind of money. And he could see the value. So I think we have to recognize there's a little bit of hypocrisy in some of the commentary around what he has done, because in his day, he was a very decent sort of retailer. I think the problem is the money kind of went to his head, as you can see from the yacht and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, so how do you think he finishes up his career? Do you see him just spending time on his yacht in Monaco, or might he reinvent himself with a new venture?
No, on his yacht in Monaco, I'm afraid, and that's probably the best place for him. And there are other types who live in that particular part of the world, so he's not alone.
We have been talking a lot, I mean, pretty much ever since I've been a journalist, about the withering of the high street, long before the effect of COVID ravaged retail. It's been good for e-commerce, hasn't it? I'm just wondering, are there any positive aspects to where we are now? Any positive trends for retail that you're spotting?
I suppose the positives, it's very harsh to talk like this, but the truth is that there's nothing like a good crisis to force people to think about what they're trying to do. And retail has needed a big shift to digital for some time, because for many years it was all about the online serving the store. And I think it's the other way around now, when you think about click and collect and curbside delivery and that kind of thing. So actually, in the future, the store has a place, of course, but it has to serve the digital. But what that leaves space for is a whole new generation of entrepreneurial, independent retailers who are already coming into this market, who have no baggage, if you like, and are perfectly happy to see retail in a totally different way, which is all about digital, some face-to-face through stores, but just generally connecting with us, the consumers, in a more human and authentic way, which is not really what traditional retail was all about.
Yeah, so we could see our high streets change quite dramatically. All right, Chris Field, really good to get your analysis on Sky News. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.